There's something about live music, something human, communal, almost primal. For a few hours, it bonds people who, in almost every other part of life, might have nothing in common, or perhaps even complete indifference towards one another. Oh shit, my fan just fell. No introductions are needed, no politics, no arguments about who is right or wrong. Sometimes no words are exchanged at all. Just frequencies and grooves shared in the night. A familiar lyric carried by thousands of voices, a guitar note hanging in the air a little longer than expected, a bass line you feel in your chest before the mind even registers it. And somehow, for that brief moment, strangers become part of the same thing. Maybe that's what makes live music so powerful. Beneath all the labels we've created for ourselves, there is still something ancient in us that understands rhythm, melody, and gathering together beneath the night sky. For a few hours, the world gets quiet, and we remember how to simply be human. I love that. And the reason I love that is because that is kind of what I felt yesterday. You know, I was at the concert, it's Willie Nelson, and so you get people from all walks of life. I mean, radical left, radical right, you get all these different conglomerations of people. And I was having a conversation with a few people, and, you know, I was saying to them, because we were having a good time just chatting, and I said, look, you know, I bet you under normal circumstances, if this was a bar or somewhere else, we would not be having these conversations. We wouldn't even like each other. They're like, I know, right? But it was because we were together for the music. It brought in a different vibe, a different context. And, you know, we have to remember these types of things so that our humanity is not lost when artificial intelligence begins to come out, begins to advance beyond the point to where our whole society is handed over to a intelligent digital landscape that now controls and dictates what you think, what you see, what you hear, what you know, what you understand, and what you remember. And I think that's really important because there's a potential for that to happen, and it's not going to happen full scale across the whole world, but it's going to happen to some people. And so we have to remember those things that bring us together, those things that penetrate deep within the heart and bring back that culture and that society and that structure, because that is what made us who we are today. I know I'm like, oh, Josh, just get to the damn news. I'm not here to. I know. Starting with the news, Dan Scavino. Did you see this post? This was awesome. He says, when you get fired for doing a spectacularly shitty job at an agency with your badge deactivated, building access revoked, and the full "you're dead to us" package, or when you get passed over for ambassadorships, boards, or commissions because there are candidates who are actually far more qualified than you, please resist the urge to sprint to every media outlet that will perform your lying bullshit and then falsely attack the people in the presidential personnel office who are out there serving President Trump, the administration, and the American people each and every day. Just take the L and move on, loser. And then puts clown at the end. Thank you for your attention to this matter. So people were speculating, who is Dan Scavino talking about here? It's Joe Kent, guys. He's talking about Joe Kent. Joe Kent went on, forgot what it was. It was one of the shows, and he was talking about Dan, and he was talking about other people. And he's even put out a reply already to Dan Scavino about this. But this brings up a larger perspective here. And I've been very vocal about Joe Kent. I don't think Joe Kent is like a Chinese asset or a socialist asset or anything like that. I don't even think that about Tucker or any of these other people. Maybe AJ, I don't know. But I think that they're really just, this is who they are. I think that these are who these people are, and they have certain beliefs and speculations about what they think is happening, and they come out and reaffirm them as if they're true in fact. And I think that that's a very dangerous precedent, especially people like Joe Kent or Tucker Carlson who exist within this infrastructure to where they have the ears of so many people. And so if you don't know what Joe Kent did, Joe Kent came out and claimed that President Trump was influenced directly by Benjamin Netanyahu to bomb Iran and get directly involved back into the Iran war that is still going on today, and that it was nothing more than an Israel plot to basically occupy Iran for the next 10 years and steal their oil and everything like that. There's parts of this that are true. There's parts of this that are wrong. Here's the problem with what Joe Kent said. Joe Kent came out and did this on the mainstream media. He came out and did it on social media. And he stated that what I know is that there was a meeting at the White House. Netanyahu came in. He gave some intelligence out there that people in the intelligence community are saying it was very low quality information, and that President Trump was heavily influenced it. And President Trump came out and said, bomb Iran. Let's do it. Let's bomb Iran. Unfortunately for Joe Kent, and he should know better than this, that's not how it works within the Situation Room, within the White House, within various structures where intelligence is given. And Donald Trump doesn't just abruptly move to say, let's bomb the shit out of a country, specifically within a midterm election year, specifically within the context of how the world operates, specifically with Iran's various different allies, that President Trump would only do these things if he knew there was a larger, greater strategy. And as we've learned from this show and from we learned prior to all this, that is the truth, is that President Trump did not act on Israel's will to go bomb Iran, that President Trump was acting within a structure of a plan that he put in place many years before Benjamin Netanyahu even walked into the White House. Now, Benjamin Netanyahu came in with intelligence. He did. He came out with a meeting that was going to happen of high-ranking IRGC officials, various different people within the clergy, the Ayatollah, so forth, with a decapitation level event that could happen, which would give the United States the upper hand. Now, this intelligence turned out to be highly accurate and true, and that's because Israel had people on the inside within the IRGC. And so maybe even they helped it happen. But that intelligence was correct. But here's the thing, is that President Trump didn't just come in and say, Hegseth, drop the bombs. No, that went through hundreds, if not thousands of people's hands in the context of decision-making processes. You have the National Security Council, you have the Pentagon, you have generals and admirals, you have various intelligence agency heads, CIA, so forth, that are looking into this intelligence. They're looking at various different planning missions that have been going on over the course of the last 10 years before that actually happened. So we have to take in the context that, what Joe Kent actually did was damage and attack towards the Trump administration, whether he believed he was acting in good faith or not. I don't think he was. I think that he was just acting upon speculation of things that he believed to be true, but necessarily weren't. Maybe it's part of a greater psyop. That is always possible, to where he's working as a disclosure agent, trying to bring attention directly to Israel and what's going on with Israel's influence into the United States, because there is a problem with the amount of influence that the country of Israel has within Congress, within Senate, within our bureaucracy. But here's the thing. It's not just Israel. And this is the one thing that not the pro-Israel, but the anti-Israel crowd, it's Israel, it's always Israel. This is one thing that they always fail to forget, is that one of the largest nation states that funds our government, our politicians, the lobby, through various different institutions and organizations, Republicans and Democrats alike, is Qatar. It's Qatar. It's Saudi Arabia. It's China. China. So, we have to take in the context that, hey, Israel does have influence. I'm not going to lie, they do. But their influence typically comes about through various other methodologies, like this, that we're going to talk about right now. So we talked about this the day that it happened. If you remember this, Air Force One was on its way to Turkey at the NATO summit. And Donald Trump made this obscure post about how the new Air Force One plane that was given to him by Turkey, that they were flying in, they made a stop in the UK. They dropped it off at a military base so that the soldiers and sailors could go out there and tour it, because it's such a great plane. And then he continued on the old Air Force One into Turkey. And I came out that night before any news talking about assassination attempts or anything like that came out. And I said, hey, this was an assassination attempt. Actually, what happened is, from what I gather, there was a cyber attack on that new Air Force One, and that the cyber attack went after the various different countermeasure systems on board Air Force One, including the missile defense countermeasure systems and so forth. And that's why they parked it in the UK. They had to go in there and fix everything. And then the old Air Force One came out. And we learned after that, it was that there was something more going on here, and that this was a potential assassination attempt. And I'm like, I told you so. But they're not releasing the one parts of the information was about a cyber attack. Now, this is from posted on X earlier from the Washington Post. So the CIA apparently wasn't buying the threat to Trump as much as Israel was. Israel reportedly warned the U.S. that Iran might try to kill Trump as he left Turkey, but the CIA looked at the intel and had low confidence in it. Right, because it was actually low confidence. And so a few days before Trump went to the NATO summit in Turkey, Netanyahu again gave into the White House, and he told Trump that Iran is going to plan to assassinate you. This is what Netanyahu told Trump. And he gave him some intelligence on it. The Secret Service wasn't taking any chances. Trump quietly switched planes in Ankara. No, he switched planes in the UK. Got driven across to the airport. Oh, this is when he was leaving. So this is when he was leaving. When he was leaving Turkey, he switched planes in Ankara, drove across the airport through a catering truck, and flew to Britain on a military jet with F-16s alongside. But so this is where it gets interesting. Some U.S. intelligence officials think Israel may have shared the warning partly to influence Trump's thinking on Iran and Turkey, not just to keep him safe. So there's multiple parts to understanding this, at least what we've gathered through various sources of intelligence, is that the threat was very, very real. I don't believe that it was Iran at all that was seeking to take out President Trump. I think that it was Israel trying to heavily influence President Trump into deeper engagement into the Iran war, as well as any type of defense cooperation agreement or pact agreements that would come about with Erdogan and Turkey, specifically that try to help disrupt the Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey defense cooperation pact that was signed just last week. I think that that's what this was about. Now, the various different problems with Air Force One. Now, what we heard is that Iran actually had drones sitting in Cuba. Now, this is important because after Trump left Turkey, he went back to Mar-a-Lago. And going back to Mar-a-Lago, you have Cuba, very close proximity. Is that Air Force One, with that cyber attack that happened, if that happened at that point in time, that means they would have been sitting fish to Iran drones. And then that type of capability comes about and that assassination becomes a reality. Although that never happened. It's actually my thoughts after learning about all of this that what really happened is that there was no cyber attack. I got really good confirmation. Maybe I'll talk about that Saturday night. I got really good confirmation that that there was a cyber attack. But I think that it might have just been kind of information put out there to say, hey, this is what I think the Trump administration did. I think they knew of the security vulnerability within Air Force One and that it was going to be utilized by some rogue nation or Iran to attack Air Force One. So they exploited it on the trip over to the NATO summit early, as if it did happen. Fixed it, all that stuff. So basically it pulls off the table any attempted assassination attempt in the future. And I think that that is exactly kind of what happened. At least that's my thoughts. Someone just said in Greg 740 said, and Greg, I'm going to put you on the spotlight here. Trump's losing to Iran. No, he's not, bro. I don't think you even know what that means. And I don't mean to call you out like that, but no, that's not true. If you think Trump's losing to Iran, you have no idea who the enemy is or what the war actually is about. And that's a little bit what we're going to talk about tonight when we get into the second part of the economic aspect of things. We have to get through a little bit of news first, where Tammy will be coming on. This will be probably an hour and a half long show. Because Tammy will be coming on for the first half an hour. We're going to transition into some news. I'm going to do a rapid fire news, and then we're going to get into the core of this, the Great Economic Reset Part 2. But I'm going to go ahead and read this, and then we're going to do that quick transition. So give me 1 second. Let me pull this up. We hear a lot about crypto, but here's the part most people miss. Crypto was created so you could actually own and control your money. After the 2008 financial crisis, Bitcoin was designed as an alternative to banks. So instead of banks holding your money, delaying transfers, or limiting access, you are in control. And if you've ever had to wait for a transfer to clear, you felt that problem. Now, fast forward to today, everyone's heard of crypto, but getting started still feels complicated. That's exactly why I use Rumble Wallet. It takes all the complexity and makes it simple. Choose what you want: Bitcoin, dollar-backed stable coins, or even digital gold backed by real gold. No complicated setup. It connects with MoonPay so you can use your credit card, debit card, or bank and be up and running in minutes. Once you are set up, you can even support your favorite Rumble creators like me directly. So do this now. Scan the QR code and click the link in the description and download the Rumble wallet. From there, you can set up your wallet, tap buy, and you are in the game. In just a few minutes, you can go from hearing about crypto to actually owning some. All right. Thank you, Rumble. I appreciate yes, and I do use the Rumble wallet, and those wallets are going to become more and more important over the course of the next few years. And why are they going to be becoming important? Because of cryptocurrency. And I've seen a lot of people start to go in and take my crypto course. And if you're wondering about this, if you're new to cryptocurrency, don't understand cryptocurrency, want to get started in cryptocurrency, I recommend that you do this before you schedule a one-on-one consult with me in the crypto world. And so I do have private consultations that I do. This is on redpills.tv. I do have private consultations that I do on cryptocurrency. But if you go to redpills.tv and you go to the support tab and scroll down a little bit, you're going to see the introduction to cryptocurrency and blockchain, a practical guide. You get a downloadable PDF book. You get the study guide that comes with that, as well as you get the course structure. That's all on this website. The instructions are real, or it's on it's on our merch store website, but you can go access that after you get this course. And the course is really good because it's going to help explain everything that's happening in the world of cryptocurrency. So redpills.tv on that one. All right, let's rapid fire. Maybe we should do a segment called Rapid Fire News, because sometimes I need the just rapid fire news. Polymarket is primarily James Talarico is now favored to flip Texas U.S. Senate seat to blue for the first time since 1988. There's a 52% chance. Let me talk about this nonsense for a second. And I have a Polymarket account, and you have to understand what Polymarket is. It's an international gambling ring. That's what it is. So when they're showing you here that there's a 52% chance that the Texas Senate election winner is going to be Talarico, the reason they're showing you that is because the majority of the accounts are anonymous. Number two is that the majority of the accounts that are actually putting in these bets going for or against are international, Chinese. They're not, this isn't American voters that are being polled. This isn't people in Texas who are being polled. This is people on the international community that are placing bets of whether this candidate is going to win or not. Be careful with that, because this statement is very misleading by Polymarket. They're acting as if their poll, or as if their graph is a poll of actual voters. It's not. It is an international online gambling ring that is stating that, hey, most people are going to bet that this person is going to win, but those people have nothing to do with the United States or Texas. Keep that in mind. I think that's really important, because that does play a role into a lot of the things that happen, into influencing people's ideas and decision making when it comes to elections. And to the point that that could even be considered election influence, prosecutable by the Department of Justice for what Polymarket is doing, because they're coming out there stating that it's an actual poll when it's international freaking brokers putting money out there, betting on what candidates they think are going to be in position. And if you think about how Chinese money begins to move that market, now China can influence directly through Polymarket. Keep that in mind. It's going to make a lot more sense when we start to get more to the show here. The Justice Department today released new images of Jessica Bowie, the woman arrested for plotting to blow up the New York State Capitol and the White House. Bowie converted to Islam after pledging allegiance to ISIS, changed her name to Aisha Saif. She wrote on social media, "Praise be to Allah for September 11th." Okay. So I put this statement out there, and I'm going to stand behind this because I think we're going to learn more information about this. ISIS has become a radical Islam boogeyman that is labeled to anyone that is set up by the FBI. And I'm betting you right now that Jessica there was probably set up by the FBI, because every time that they mention ISIS in the United States, that's typically what it is. The FBI is setting these people up, putting them up to it, having them go to Home Depot, buy all the parts, and then they arrest them. It's been going on for decades of how the FBI actually does that. Now, is there a threat to this country? Absolutely there is. With 23 million illegal immigrants that came over our southern border, that threat is more pertinent today than it has ever been before. Those threats come about through Hamas and Hezbollah, and through ISIS and ISIL and Al-Qaeda and Taliban and South American gangs and cartels and Mexican gangs and cartels that have infiltrated our border through the Joe Biden administration. And here's the thing is you can't deport them fast enough. And so there is a direct threat to the United States of America, but that doesn't mean that threat is going to manifest into anything, because people who control those organizations and groups, the what they would consider to be their army, they are very methodical in their planning and strategy of how they would implement something like that to come about, what we call the firestorm event. And it's not going to be one-offs here and there. It is going to be a 1 to 2 night scenario to where that plays out with a full-scale invasion of our cities. And that is their scorched earth theory, to where we potentially could be coming to, but we'll see how well the Trump administration has done to mitigate much of that threat. So we're going to go in here. And here's the other part. This is a patriot out in Michigan, and I don't know his name and I don't know the people who posted this, but I want to play this because this is what we call the Crusaders speech. And if you noticed, Guardians of Truth has a Crusaders theme to it. There's a reason for that, but I want you to listen to what this gentleman says.
You guys want to talk about how you're being honest and you're speaking from the heart. Not one of you people that come here and speak without a freaking script in your hands, word for word reading it. You got a mayor that tells an American citizen that he cannot be welcome in Dearborn, Michigan if he doesn't want a damn terrorist on the name of a street. You got members on the board over there laughing at American citizens when they're concerned about Sharia law and the Muslims that are telling us we're going to take over your city. We have Hassan Piker saying we're going to do things to your women. And we're saying, oh, this is peaceful? That you people came here to give us peace? You guys came here to conquer us. This is the Crusades all over again. You're going to think you're going to take this country without firing a shot? How about this? How about the American citizens say, no, you're not going to do this. That's right. We're going to stand up. We're going to tell you, everybody here, from felons to normal people, Bible thumpers, little grannies everywhere, tell this Muslim invasion, you're not going to happen in the United States of America, not while Christian Crusaders are standing here blocking you. That's all I got to say.
Wow. This is where we're at. Texas, Minnesota, Michigan, Wisconsin. It's everywhere and it's growing. And the problem here is you have to go back and understand the cultural the cultural methodology utilized by Sharia law and radical Islam is that first, what they do is they migrate. This is what's happening in Europe. This is what's happening in the United States. The second thing they do is they reproduce. And when they reproduce, they implement their children into Western culture. It doesn't work. This brings about problems. The neighborhoods start to go to shit. The neighborhoods start to decline. Fights break out, threats are given out there. People start to move out of their communities. And then this is where they take over. This is where they take over those communities. And they just keep on replicating that same thing over and over and over again until they own the whole state and eventually the whole country. This has happened for a very long time, over 1,000 years, just like this. But now they're in the United States of America and they have to deal with people like that patriot, like the people of Minnesota and Michigan, people of Texas, to where these people will not stand idly by. And I mean that with all sincerity. These people are not going to stand idly by. That this is going to raise in severity as this moves forth and people become more and more threatened, because those people in Michigan, they're not leaving. And eventually what's going to happen is they are going to try to take back their country. Not saying I agree with that methodology that they're going to use. I'm not saying I don't disagree with it. I'm just telling you that that moment in time in history is coming. So Dan Bilzerian lost his primary to Randy Fine. And Randy Fine, by the way, is the Jewish lobby spokesperson, if you want to call it that. And what's interesting is that, you know, not that I don't support either of these people. I don't like either of these people. But this is truly concerning because this is 2026, right before the midterm elections. And this happened in the good state of Florida. And Randy Fine had 8,688 votes, 37.9%. Dan Bilzerian had 8,191 votes at 35.7%. This was earlier in the day. This was about 7:34 p.m. Well, what happened is about 11 p.m. About 10 minutes later, I think it was, when a new dump of information came out. The new dump of information came out. What happened? Randy Fine had 19,480 votes, where Dan Blazarian had 6,383 votes. He went down in votes, and we even showed this earlier. Now, you can't lose votes. It doesn't work that way. When votes are counted by the state or the county, they're counted. You don't lose and go backwards. That happened to Donald Trump on 2020 election multiple different times. We watched it live on TV. It's indicative of cheating. And the question is how? And why? And how is it still possible? How is that even happening in the state of Florida? And it goes back to potentially the one idea that we've talked about before. The reason why you're not going to get the Save America Act through the Senate, the reason why right after, January 6th, House members and members of the Senate basically crucified Donald Trump. And they wanted nothing to do with election fraud and interference in our elections, and they wouldn't investigate 2020 is because they're all in on it. Because it's a uni party, and they know that some of them, that their own positions in Congress and Senate are determined by that steal that actually occurs. That's the problem. We don't have a broken system. The system was designed this way. And we just have to do better as people to learn about the fourth branch, our voice, and what we can do to change that system back to something that's more secure for us, who gives us the power, not the lobby, not foreign interest, not special interest, and definitely not some type of international organization that is trying to steal our elections. Michael Cohen. Fucking weird. Trump is going to be going on the Michael Cohen podcast. This is kind of interesting, but Michael Cohen has apparently flipped back to Trump, says that Alvin Bragg and Letitia James pressured and coerced him, basically threatening him with prosecutions starting in 2019 to give testimony tailored to secure convictions and judgments against Donald Trump. Now that's interesting. Why is that interesting? Well, what if Michael Cohen was always just a kayfabe agent of Donald Trump to begin with, because he knew that New York was going to target him and that Michael Cohen would have been that precursor towards that targeting. And so he used that. And then when they followed through with the prosecution and everything like that, then what happens? Michael Cohen comes out and says, oh, no, they threatened to prosecute me if I didn't do this. And this begins to come out at the same time all this other stuff comes out. I think that we're going to learn something very interesting when Donald Trump goes on Michael Cohen's podcast. I'm interested to see what happens. Stephen Hilton tells Joe Rogan how Joe Biden and Xavier Becerra open border policies turned HHS into the largest child trafficking operation in history. 479,000 unaccompanied kids crossed the border during Biden's 4 years. He dismantled the vetting of getting those children to safe places, so they lost track of hundreds of thousands of kids, and many went to child sex traffickers and other horrific things. We know what those other horrific things are if you paid attention to this show for a long time. Hilton describes whistleblowers raising alarms about children being sent to suspicious locations, and even a child allegedly being sent to a gangster wanted by Interpol. When they raised flags, they were fired. One of the whistleblowers said there's a notorious child sex trafficking street in Sonoma, California. Before this, most of the girls were African-American. Before Becerra's camps, they were mostly Latin girls. They set up trafficking hotline for the kids if they felt they were in danger. There were 65,000 unanswered calls to that hotline. The people who pointed it out were fired. Now, this is a massive scandal because it's what is shown is intentionality behind these changes and this ignorance and this malfeasance that went about within HHS during this point in time. And I truly believe that Steve Hilton, who's a friend of Trump, is getting this information from somebody in the administration, basically setting the narrative for what comes next towards Becerra, Newsome, and all of these other people involved, including the Biden administration, because something's going on right now with the Biden administration. It's almost like what we talked about before, that the 4 years of the Biden administration was a setup. That, hey, look, they're trying to steal the election. We know this, but this was a setup to basically monitor and track the criminality, allow them to fuck it all up so we can go back and hammer and prosecute them when we win back in 2026. And I think, or 2024. And I think that might be the situation that we're looking at here right now. Because just yesterday, what did we learn? This morning, Former Representative Eric Swalwell, which we said would be in the news again, is facing a rapidly escalating federal investigation. FBI agents reportedly executed search warrants, seized Swalwell's electronic devices, his laptop, his cell phone, and so forth. Meanwhile, newly released FBI documents have reignited the separate Fang Fang controversy. They're not separate. These are definitely the same thing. And what we're getting is that Swalwell might actually be indicted on going out there and coercing witnesses and trying to threaten witnesses against him. And there is other parts here that is going on with the Fang Fang investigation. That's why this is coming back up, and connections to China. And we're going to talk about that here in the economic part of things. Well, not the part of this that's coming up here. So let's get into the election stuff real quick. Because this is part of the great economic reset that we're talking about. And the reason I say that it's part of the great economic reset is because I've always said about this leaving the old world and coming into the new world, and 1 foot out of that door, 1 foot in this door. And we're closing the door on this one side. And this is the prosecutions, the criminality, fixing our election systems, accountability, all of these things. And that can only come about when that narrative was set up. And this is what we have seen the stage being set for over the course of the last 2 years. And so now we're starting to see something else on the horizon. And this is the economic front of what is happening, and economic warfare being utilized through unrestricted warfare strategies, and what Donald Trump is implementing in a new framework. We're going to get into that here in a second, but we have to go into the voter stuff. We have to get into the crime and corruption and accountability stuff, because this is important, because it's going to show you how they manipulated the system, how the system was fake and gay and controlled by them, how crony capitalism actually worked and operated, how power and influence in Washington, D.C. was controlled by these multinational criminal cartels. So a Michigan Democrat-linked voter registration group was caught knowingly and willfully fabricating fake voter registration profiles of imaginary people. Wait a minute. Hold on a second here. Let's listen to John Solomon talk about this, and then you guys can go ahead and pat me on the shoulder for this one, because I said this 2 years ago.
The third thing that was suppressed from the American public was the discovery of a voter mill in Michigan, a domestic run by a Democrat-funded group that was knowingly and willfully, according to its own workers, creating fake voter registration profiles that people then could request ballots. People would talk about, like, if I couldn't find a real voter, I just made it up. I signed it myself. I made up names. I used my friends. The FBI had dead red evidence of a clear criminal effort to.
Okay. Thanks, John Solomon. Because what does this new information that is coming out and being declassified show you and prove? Well, one of the things that I've talked about for a long time, if you remember when I said COPO? Citizens on paper only. That one of the things that Doge uncovered when Elon Musk was in there was employees on paper only. Fake agencies created by congressional committees funded with millions of dollars, 30 people working there. The Doge committee goes down there and there's nobody there. Nobody's working. This is why Elon sent out that email to all government employees and asked them what they were doing, because they're trying to determine how many fake employees the government actually had that were collecting paychecks and benefits that didn't actually exist. Well, I said the same thing. I said, well, guess what? We have something known as citizens on paper or only. And what do we mean by this? See, the whole theory that the reason the Democrats bring in the illegal immigrants is for the votes, because they know that those illegal immigrants are going to vote Democrat. There's no assurances that illegal immigrants are going to vote Democrat. You have various different parts that are going to, because they're coerced and forced into it. A lot of the Muslim groups through imams and the influence over the imams, this is what happens, or various different gang groups. But you're not assured that every damn illegal immigrant is going to vote for you. It's not about the vote of the illegal immigrant. It's about the numbers that are counted on the census. It's about the number of people that are recorded within that state or that region in that district. It's about the number of ballots you can actually send out. So therefore, what they do is they create fictitious people, citizens on paper only, to basically account for the missing number of actual real legitimate people, and not knowing if illegal immigrants are going to go vote or not. And it's not only illegal immigrants. This is why they leave dead people on the voter rolls. This is why they go out there and create fake driver's licenses. This is the scam in the scheme. And the question is do we actually have 380 million people in our population? Probably not even close. Probably not even anywhere near that. In a 2020 FBI report stated China was shipping fake U.S. driver's licenses to recipients described as Chinese students and immigrants, sympathizers of the Chinese Communist Party already living in the U.S., who would then use those licenses to cast fraudulent mail-in votes for Joe Biden. And they did this multiple different times with the fake driver's licenses. Exactly. Citizens on paper only. Fake citizens. Now, one of the things that I've been telling you to do is watch with this declassification of information. So we talked about DNI Tulsi Gabbard's June 30th declassification, 72 biolabs in Ukraine, that connection to Metabiota, the Metabiota connection to Nathan Wolf, Jeffrey Epstein, the Metabiota connection to Rosemont Seneca, Burisma, Hunter Biden, Devin Archer, because that was critically important to understand that part. And then at the same time, she declassified information about the lab origins from Wuhan Institute of Virology of the COVID vaccine. At the same time, Fauci information started to come out showing that he covered up through the intelligence agencies the lab origins, lied about the science, lied about the restrictions put on the American people. He lied about the efficacy of the vaccines that were put out there, not only lied about it, but basically colluded against the American people to make money and to gain fame and notoriety. So all of that was coming out. And then we have Donald Trump making an address to the nation, talking specifically about China and how China influenced and interfered with the 2020 election. Not that they flipped votes, not that they went out there and attacked our voting machines, that they interfered through the methodologies of the attack that they did, and they influenced by paying mainstream media and podcasters and various other people on social media money to basically go against Trump and create an anti-Trump narrative and rhetoric that spread like wildfire because they had their bot farms and so forth that then would amplify and push it out there. At the same time, China was doing other operations of where they were interfering with the U.S. elections, including cyber attacks and exploits within voting systems, stealing over 20 million voter records from 18 different states' databases. This is both public and private information. So it's important to note that that constitutes a direct threat to national security. And as we talked about, that's the predicate of the national emergency. And why Trump put that out there at that specific time is because right afterwards, you have 3 different declassifications of information that came out. You had March Toll, you had Oxford, and then you had Round River. Now, Round River is actually the most damning out of the two. What it shows is that there was weaponization of the Department of Justice, of the FBI. Andy McCabe became acting FBI director after James Comey was fired, and he opened up 2 investigations. Oxford, investigating Donald Trump, the sitting president, duly elected president of the United States, as a Russian foreign agent, and another one, the acting attorney general at the time, as a Russian foreign agent. That was March Toll. But then we get this other investigation that comes out, opened up by the FBI, a counterintelligence investigation, which labeled Donald Trump, Jeff Sessions, all of these people, right-wing conservative media personalities, all as Russian disinformation agents that need to be investigated. That was done by the pre-Biden administration. But then you get on the other side is that known agents of Russian disinformation. That's what they labeled them as. And then on the other side, you get the people that are the victims or the targets of Russian disinformation, with basically a counterintelligence operation stating that, hey, don't investigate these people because everything coming out against them is Russian disinformation. And when you start to go through that list, you start noticing some interesting things. And one of the things I noticed was Rosemont Seneca Bodai. And I said, oh my goodness, that's interesting because that company took a massive amount of Chinese money. And I told you that the Trump administration is setting the narrative, setting the stage to start linking all of these puzzle pieces together that goes into the context that, hey, the 2020 election was stolen because, the mail-in ballot scams and the amount of fake voters that were out there. That was one of the predicates that came about for that. That COVID-19, if that never happened, then the 2020 election could never have been stolen. And if, if the midterm elections weren't funded by Soros and Singham, then the attorney generals and secretary of states who made those decisions could have never have done that. That there was a grand conspiracy being organized aligned with this. And I told you recently, I said, follow the money. Follow the money, because what you're about to see is the Chinese money connection starting to come in. And what did we learn today from John Solomon? I love it. Exactly as I told you. I said, start watching, because what you're going to start seeing through declassified information is the Chinese money connection to the left, to the Democrat, to the DNCs, to the various different institutions.
Soon, very soon, we'll be releasing a fifth vulnerability. That fifth vulnerability will be focused on looking at ways that China has gained influence in a very important political institution, and the FBI's knowledge of it, potentially the FBI's complicity in it. And it will raise a lot of questions about not only failing to punish some bad behavior, but also whether the FBI's way of penetrating and stopping China is in some ways flawed. And we'll be able to talk about that in the next couple of weeks as well.
Okay. Any hints? Which institution?
No, but I will say this. We once had a scandal in America. In the 90s, I covered it. In fact, I broke the original stories. It was myself and Bob Woodward and the Wall Street Journal about the China fundraising scandal of the 1990s involving Bill Clinton, the Lincoln bedroom, the Buddhist monks. It would be not unsurprising to people to think that China would go back and once again try to inject money into the political system through a particular institution. And so,
okay, what's John Solomon talking about there? We don't know the institution that he's talking about. Nobody knows. What he was talking about there is referring to the 1996 Asai Lay temple scandal, where Buddhist monks and nuns at the California temple served as straw donors for $100,000 in illegal reimbursed contributions, mainly to the Clinton Gore Democrat campaigns. That's from MJ Truth, who did that dig and research. So I think that this is many people are trying to think Act Blue, because Act Blue is in the news right now with all of this. But I think that this is not going to be Act Blue that they're going to name. Why? Because there's other parts right now that we have to start looking at. Last week, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth ordered Harvard, MIT, Georgetown, and 27 other universities. They have till the end of the month to audit their ties to China, Russia, and Iran. Harvard took more than $600 million from Beijing, more than any other U.S. school, and they had 140 research partnerships with Chinese military entities. Pentagon-funded weapons class at the Midwest University was taught in Mandarin to Chinese nationals. Dozens of researchers on Pentagon products later went to work for China's military. I've been saying this. That's huge. If you start to look at the work that Natalie Winters is doing, I tried to hit up Natalie. I said, hey, I got some information for you, because one of the things that I broke a while back was the connection between the SAP program emails on Hillary Clinton's private email server and the 100,000 Talents program brought in with Barack Obama in 2019, which provided educational exchange with China and the United States of America. And how when the Trump administration came in 2016, one of the first things they did is they shut down that program. Then they indicted 32 college professors throughout the United States that all had tax evasion because they took money directly from China. So what was going on is China was funding U.S. universities and then going in and directly hand-picking various different scientists and professors, bringing them over to China. And that's how China advanced their military 10 years in a very short time. I've been talking about this for years. I was probably one of the first people to actually make that connection. Now, what's interesting about that connection is that how did China know which university professors to go out there and target specifically? Well, that was the context of Hillary Clinton's emails that gave them that. And so when we start to see Hegseth doing this right now, this is kind of what they're oriented to. Now, what do I think they're going to talk about? What John Solomon was talking about there? The Penn Biden Center for Diplomacy and Global Engagement. If you remember what happened a few years ago, discovered classified information was found, Obama-era documents in a locked office closet at the Penn Biden Center on November 2nd, 2022, 6 days before the midterm elections. The discovery was immediately reported to the National Archives. Public wasn't informed until 2023. Then you have various different Chinese donations that came into the University of Pennsylvania, including the Biden Penn Center. That's where I think that this is going. I think that you're going to see declassified information going to come out about this vulnerability of China basically giving massive amounts of money to the Biden Penn Center, because this is going to be strictly in the context of what we've been talking about. We're talking about how the DNC, the Democrats, the Biden administration, post-Obama era were heavily funded and influenced by China and other international organizations through institutions, through universities, through private organizations, through Act Blue. And we know about the Act Blue straw man of how they were operating. They used private companies to take in foreign donations. They would spoof the credit card information of donors who maybe gave $5 or $10, and they would max out those donations to various different candidates within that district. Today, Act Blue co-founder Matt DeBergalis pleaded the fifth in closed-door deposition when questioned on whether or not they allowed foreign donations to be funneled to the Democrat campaign. So this is 2 points that you're going to see. The Biden Penn Center, universities. This is why Natalie Winter is coming out with all of this information. U.S. professors that have DARPA, DOD contracts going to China and selling out to China. This is huge. So you're going to see all of these connections of the money aspect of things. Why does that matter? Because now tie in all that levels of intelligence. They weaponized the DOJ against President Trump. They released a virus on the world. They stole the 2020 election through election interference and influence. They were funding the Democrats during this whole time. They're funding organizations, private institutions, public institutions funded by U.S. taxpayer money. At that same time, there's direct links and connectivity to the Biden administration, to post-Obama era people, to the Democrats with this money chain that flows in from China on out in the context of how all of this weaponization and the stealing of elections actually happened. So this is something massive to start paying attention to. Act Blue is nothing more than an international political money laundering operation. I've said that multiple different times. It's going to be interesting because I think there's indictments coming down the road for Act Blue. Now, quick transition. And I know Jason's probably watching. He's like, Josh, what's going on, man? We'll get Tammy on here in the next 15 minutes. I got to get through a few different things. I want to go out here and actually, I'm going to read this one as we do this quick transition right now. And let me read this one. Today's video is brought to you by Chicago Steak Company. A gourmet steak box should give you more than a pile of grocery store meats. That cut matters. The aging matters, and how it arrives matters, all before the grill ever gets hot. Chicago Steak Company hand selects and hand cuts its steaks, wet ages select cuts, and ships them packed with dry ice, so they should arrive frozen. Build your order around USDA Prime Filet Mignon and Chicago's best seller. For a limited time, order $179 or more and use code SAVORY, SAVORY. You'll get 4 free premium boneless petite strip steaks, a sampler cheesecake, free shipping, and a $25 credit after your package ships, valid for 6 months. The complete bundle is stated $299 of value. Go to mychicagosteak.com and use code SAVORY. That's SAVORY. Link is in the description on Rumble for anybody who wants to take advantage of that. All right. So going back in here, we're going to do a quick transition into this. The most crushing economic operation ever taken against any country. That was the direct words from President Donald J. Trump. He says, no one has given the Islamic Republic of Iran a greater opportunity to make a deal than me. Tragically for them, they have failed to take it. Therefore, today I'm announcing the most crushing economic operation ever taken against this country. This will be an economic warfare and isolation on an unprecedented scale. Their Navy is gone. Their Air Force is destroyed. Their military factories are now rubble. Their currency is worthless, and their country is hanging by a thread. Today, I'm also announcing that any country that allows its financial institutions, businesses, airports, or government entities to provide any type of lifeline to Iran will itself face tremendous economic consequences. Oil smuggling, swap lines, cash transfers, exchanges, exchange houses, ship registries, front companies. It all needs to stop now. You know who you are. This will be an economic D-Day, and we need all of our allies to stand with the United States of America to isolate and defeat the Iran threat. The maniacs are on the ropes, and those historic measures will cripple them and their ability to project terror worldwide. Iran will never have a nuclear weapon. Thank you for your attention on this matter, President Donald J. Trump. Now, many people are starting to listen to that, and they're probably thinking, oh, those countries, man, that must be China and Russia. It's not China and Russia. It's London. What he was talking about, he was talking about Europe. Europe is one of the the continents, European Union countries, England, France, they're one of the ones that are hurt most economically because of what is happening in Iran. A lot of their energy actually comes through the Strait of Hormuz. And so when he's talking about those other countries, you know who they are. And he talks about financial institutions, businesses, airports, government entities that provide any type of lifeline to Iran itself will face tremendous economic consequences. He talks about oil smuggling, swap lines, cash transfers, exchange houses, ship registries, and front companies. That is London, who he's talking to. So really interesting, the target right there directed towards London. So what we're about to see is economic warfare, unrestricted warfare, waged on a scale that nobody's ever seen before. Trump, and this comes from Benny, where he says, Trump just pulled off a stealth move that will permanently shift the global order, and I agree with this. It was reported by CNN and Axios yesterday that America is able to move 15 million barrels of oil a day out of the Persian Gulf. Iran is able to move zero. Iran has completely lost control of the Strait of Hormuz to the point where all global oil market monitors admit it. So the U.S. blockade has cut off Iranian oil from reaching China, crippling their market while wiping out trillions. Yes. They make it even worse for the regime. President Trump has struck a massive deal with Canada to revive the Keystone XL pipeline. We're simultaneously ramping up Venezuelan oil production for Fortress America. Meanwhile, Middle Eastern countries are rapidly building pipelines around the Hormuz to make it irrelevant. The geopolitical power move makes America the number one producer, procurer, and protector of energy production in the world. On top of all that, Trump announces economic D-Day for Iran, cutting off their financial lifelines. This is how you got the war of economic attrition. Now, that's important because when we're sitting here talking about this, it doesn't just affect Iran. It affects Europe. It affects China, primarily China. Number two is that the United States becomes the controller of the global resources and assets, the accessibility, the choke points, Panama Canal, Strait of Hormuz, next be the Strait of Malacca. You're going to start seeing more of the Trump administration starting to protect and defend these global assets and how those global assets are reallocated under the control of the United States of America, because there's a larger war here, what we call the silent war, the artificial intelligence war. He who obtains artificial superintelligence first is going to become the leader of the world over the course of the next 100 years. And if China did it, well, then we were screwed. And if the United States does it, well, then we win. And here's the key, is that China was very, very close to defeating us without ever firing a single shot through the technological race that is happening right now. But what Donald Trump did, it is he utilized their doctrine of unrestricted warfare to go out there and wage, an economic war that people never saw coming through the national security strategy, the national defense strategy, talking about Northern Canada, Greenland, talk about the Arctic, Panama Canal, what happened in Venezuela, taking the three-legged energy triangle away from China, Iran, Venezuela, Russia, controlling the Straits of Hormuz. All of this is a direct shot at China, who China at the same time is running a proxy war in Ukraine by funding and financing Russia against NATO, where NATO wants full-scale war because they know that that destabilization with Russia would basically bring all nations into a global war front. And now they have the control and manipulation of the global stage to basically usher in their new world order, which is not going to happen at this stage because of the dismantling that Trump has done of much of their infrastructure economically and politically in the world. So right now, Europe is in a very, very bad position and a very bad stance due to the rampant migration into their country and the failing economic policies because of the changes that Donald Trump has brought about within the global economy. China is even in a worse position. If you remember BRICS, you don't hear about it too much anymore. China had built out the Belt and Roads Initiative throughout the world, taking over various different ports of entry, controlling much of the supply chain and supply line and the accessibility and choke points in the world of the global supply chain. Donald Trump has reversed that within less than 2 freaking years. Someone earlier said that Iran is beating Trump. No, they're not even close. And when you start to look at Iran as the primary focus of the Iran war, you've already lost the conversation and debate, because the war is not about Iran. It's not about Israel. It is about China. It is about the London banking infrastructure. It is about the control of the global economy, how the London banks, how the London institutions, financial institutions have utilized the Iranian terror premium. We got to remember, after the Shah was overthrown, you had Khamenei that came into Iran, who was shipped out from France. Then you had Khomeini, who was living in England at the time, that goes in there. Khomeini, before his death, was worth $48 billion that was held in banks in the Isle of Man off the coast of England. Why is that? Because he was financed by MI6. We have the Iran terror premium. Anytime that the Ayatollah came out and threatened the Strait of Hormuz, you would have oil premiums increase. Why? Because the insurance premiums to move through the Strait of Hormuz, 85% of them were controlled by Lloyd's of London, a 300-year-old company directly in the London financial district. And what happens is, before they increased or raised those rates, derivatives traders or various different market traders in London would buy up all the oil futures for the next few days. And then when the insurance premiums went out there and the oil rates increased, they would then sell them off for profitability. And over 47 years, that's equivalent to $33 trillion in profitability. So that's one mechanism of just one choke point in the world that was $33 trillion worth of profitability. This was what London was doing, what England was doing, the old guard situation, and they controlled many others within the world. So keep that in mind, because the target was never Iran. It was the people and the organizations and countries that were basically controlling Iran, controlling the regime, and controlling the various different choke points in that region. And you can go look at Benjamin Netanyahu and how pissed off he is when he says that Israel's objectives in Iran are different than President Trump's objectives in Iran. And President Trump has overwhelmingly rug pulled Netanyahu multiple different times over the course of the last 6 months in this war. So you can't sit there and say that, oh, this is all Israel's war and Trump's going to get it. Just stop with that. I mean, I'll debate anybody on that topic because I think it's absolute nonsense. So we're coming into this idea that, okay, well, what happens? We got $40 trillion worth of debt, right? Over $1 trillion freaking monthly global payments and all this happening on our debt. What are we going to do? Well, there's a new solution coming. We just had the crypto meeting at the White House. Bitcoin prices began to skyrocket and move up. Trump came out and said that he reveals the U.S. is considering purchasing sizable amounts of Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. Look, crypto momentum is good. The rise in price of cryptocurrency is good. It's healthy. It reaffirms the importance and inevitably of the transition towards a new financial system being built around digital assets. This is important to understand, though, but the momentum should not be confused with maturity. The harsh reality is that crypto still lacks the broad retail foundation, transactional utility, and deeply integrated economic infrastructure needed to substantiate sustained price appreciation across markets. Prices can run ahead of adoption. Speculation can create temporary booms, but eventually valuation has to meet utility. Now, that's a lot of crypto jargon. If you don't know what I'm talking about, it's something I've talked about for years, is that, yeah, we're having a micro boom right now in cryptocurrency, but that is not going to be prolonged. There's a lot of things happening right now to where that price is probably going to come back down because it's not time yet. You don't have retail user adoption. You don't have global utility being utilized within blockchain and cryptocurrency technologies. And because of that, you're going to have a problem on how that all plays out. Because if you don't have that global support mechanism, that framework in place of how the usability of these assets, then none of that's ever going to happen. Now you enter in tokenization. A lot of talk over the course of the last few days has been about tokenization. This is where it becomes a reality. With tokenization, you become the controller and the owner of various different assets. It allows for you to invest in all different types of assets that exist within the world that you normally would not have accessibility to. Not only that, is it brings real everyday American average people into the liquidity fold of how these global transactions are actually made. We talked about the New York Stock Exchange, NASDAQ, so forth. They're going to be tokenized all of the shareholdings of various different companies. Well, why is that interesting? Because when it's traded 24/7 and this is being traded back and forth, you have to have protocols in place in order for those transactions to occur. Liquidity needs to happen. And the banks and large financial institutions don't hold all of that alone. This is why companies like XPay and Coinbase, they offer you 4% to hold stable coins on their platforms because they're going to pay you to basically provide the liquidity. And that's going to get even better as time moves on. But there's another part to all of this when we start talking about the global economy. Donald Trump has a plan. Much of it hasn't been announced yet. There's $20 trillion flowing into the United States of America over the course of the next 10 years that's going to build out a technological, innovative infrastructure that is going to revolutionize this planet and this country. It's going to increase our GDP probably tenfold over the course of the next 10 to 20 years. Just today, Amazon announced a multi-billion-dollar robotics manufacturing facility in Austin, Texas, creating massive amounts of jobs. Elon Musk came out and said one day Optimus plus Grok will provide incredible medical care to all people on Earth. This revolution is not going to be stopped. It is happening. Now, here's the key. Many of these companies working with President Trump that are taking a lot of this money that is coming through various different investors, the 20 trillion, are giving portions of their company to the United States of America. 10% of Intel, worth over $50 billion, is owned by the people of the United States of America. Well, how do you mitigate that to the people, or how do you distribute that to the people of the United States of America? Well, there's a system that Trump is working with right now, and the way that I see this system working, and what I learn is this system is going to work, is you have the idea of a strategic Bitcoin reserve that Trump has talked about and touted. He's already provided the executive order. We're just waiting on Congress to get off their asses. Congress is waiting for the Clarity Act and the final bill's resolution to come about before the Bitcoin strategic reserve is actually set up. And then before that, what you're going to see is most likely a constitutional amendment change that is going to be requested for a sovereign wealth fund. And this is where it gets really, really important when you start to look at all the different things that President Trump is doing. The sovereign wealth fund is going to be unlike anything that we've ever experienced in the United States of America. The Native Americans have one. Alaska has one. Saudi Arabia, Qatar, UAE with smaller populations, they have one. Lots of countries have it. What you're about to see happen over the course of the next few years with the sovereign wealth fund and its integration is that as more investment capital begins to flow into the United States of America, that investment capital will be returned by these corporations with percent interest within their companies and their profitabilities that will flow into the sovereign wealth fund. At top of that, tariff revenue will flow into the sovereign wealth fund. On top of that, we will have appreciating assets that will be put into the sovereign wealth fund. Gold, silver, Bitcoin, like the strategic Bitcoin or the strategic Bitcoin reserve, will be put into there. Then all of the leases held by the U.S. federal government that are being offshore leases, oil and gas, all of these will be held in there. The exploration of the Arctic and new discoveries of oil and gas, those leases will be put into the sovereign wealth funds in the context of profitability. Why is this important? Because right now we work off of this credit debt system. The United States Congress goes out there, they propose a budget, they send it over to the Treasury, Treasury sends it over to the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve says, we're going to loan you this money at this amount of interest. They issue the bonds out, they sell the bonds, they raise the money, and they give the money to the federal government that then goes spends it radically. And now we are in debt for that money, and there's really no way to pay it back because there's not a revenue, there's not a surplus of revenue coming in. Well, Donald Trump's plan is a little bit different. The idea is to put all of our assets into one bucket that has appreciation over time. Number one is we borrow money out from that. We don't touch any of the assets in that bucket, but we borrow money due to the collateralization of the appreciating assets. So we take it out from stablecoin companies by issuing them 25-year to 50-year gold and Bitcoin bonds. Why? Because we all know where Bitcoin's going to be in the next 5 to 10 years. These companies, they print out stable coins, $1 trillion, $5 trillion, $7 trillion. They send it over to the federal government. They distribute it out there to everybody who needs it and now gets traded in exchange in the world. Now that produces this obviously transactional infrastructure that has come about with tokenization. But at the same time, what about those bonds? You got to pay those bonds back over the next 50 years. Well, here's the beautiful thing is if Bitcoin increases 20 or 30% over the course of that next year, or if you have appreciating assets within your sovereign wealth fund that are collateralized on those bonds just paid for themselves. Those bonds just paid for themselves. The profitability from that can now be utilized to pay back the debt. Now you have a surplus. That profitability of the appreciating assets in the sovereign wealth fund now go to fund the government. This is what Scott Bessent and Trump and Scavino, all of them are saying, that we're not going to have to pay income taxes because you're not going to need the revenue for the government because of the sovereign wealth fund will be generating revenue from the various different deals that it constructed with all of these other tech companies and the innovation happening, the ownership of various different rights and the land leases and all of these assets. it's appreciating, which means that there is profit being generated. When there's profit being generated, now that funds the government. What you need elsewhere, you borrow, and then that pays back itself through the appreciative assets. And guess what you do when you have a surplus? Every year you give back to the American people through dividends. This is what the Trump accounts were all about. The Trump accounts were about setting up the infrastructure, the framework for the sovereign wealth fund that will eventually have investment structures of the sovereign wealth fund in it for you. At least this is how I see what the Trump administration is doing, but it's going to completely transition the global economy to one that you can never even thought of that is beneficial towards the American people. Let me send this out. Okay. Needed to come in. So we have a lot happening within this economic front. There's an economic war going on. This is the global economic reset. How all of this corruption is being weeded out and basically decimated throughout the world, China and London and all of their control mechanisms, how the United States of America is going out there and doing a reallocation of global assets and choke points and the accessibility and bringing this under the power and control of the United States of America. This dwindles the power structures of these old economic systems and allows the Trump administration to come in with new frameworks that then begin to implement in place to become the new infrastructure moving forward of the global economy. So that's where we're at. And this is what I mean about the global economic reset, is that we are going through this transition. First thing that's going to happen is you're going to have accountability and indictments. The crime and criminality and corruption, of which is going to be tied to the money section, is going to be tied to China and the Democrats. And that's going to happen. You're going to see accountability come from that. I absolutely believe you're going to. If not, we're going to have a civil war. You will have accountability that comes from that. You got Joe DeGeneva in the Southern District of Florida, who potentially has indictments coming over around Labor Day timeframe. That's going to set the stage for the midterm elections. We have a potential national emergency declared on the midterm elections that is going to come about, I think, around October timeframe. That's going to ensure the safety and security of those elections and the integrity of those elections. At the same time, you have the tokenized framework that are coming in place, the Clarity Act, various different bills that President Trump is operating with, the sovereign wealth fund. All of this is being integrated. So you have 1 foot out the old door with the old door closing, and then 2 feet in the new door with that new door opening. That's where we are at today. So buckle up, buttercups. It's going to be interesting. So what we're going to do is we're going to head over to Tammy